What can we do for you?
All right, who am I on with?
This is Secular Sexuality with Dr. Darrel Ray, and I'm Christy Powell.
All right, hi, Christy Powell. This is Megan. I'm calling. First off, huge fan of Dr. Ray. I've seen quite a few different shows with the ACA and the Atheist Experience with him in them. And
Great.
I think that's awesome, the Recovery from Religion project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's awesome what he's doing. I was calling in. I heard the last gal talking a little bit about the Celebrate Recovery thing, and I posted up an ad in the chat, actually. There is an article that involves gang stalking and hate dissemination affiliated with NA. I can say from personal experience that connects back out into society through law enforcement and whatnot. And it's kind of scary that law enforcement supports such a program. But yeah, so it talks about how they talk about how it's anonymous, but really they're out to basically like help somebody, quote unquote, hit a rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes in the process, they're doing a lot more harm than good. As far as I know, the success rate is about 20% of the people that embrace the program. So it's 80% that oftentimes they are worse off than when they started with the program. And the system seems to be like, well, this is the best we've got. So, and I think it just needs to be entirely rebooted with a secular morality type mindset.
Yeah, or at least not bolstered by our courts, not bolstered by parole officers. I mean, it's so common now to basically prescribe or mandate this type of treatment when there's no reason to believe that it actually works. And the separation of church and state, the secular aspects are thin at best for this type of program. And if people want to go to church, that's their right in this country. And I do, even as a atheist who is incredibly concerned about the influence of religion on our culture, I do respect people's rights to maintain those beliefs. But it absolutely horrifies me to see so many people hurt by the systems that are meant to protect them by shoving them into the arms of these types of programs.
Megan, when I hear the things like 20% success rate, and I don't doubt you, I don't have the data that you probably got. Anytime somebody claims a success rate, you wanna ask the question, well, where's the peer-reviewed research that supports that claim? Mm-hmm. There's no one doing research in this area. And the research, what little research has been done is oftentimes extremely biased and very unscientific. And as you've noticed, an 20% success rate means 80% of the people are worse off in all likelihood. That's not a success rate. You're causing more problems than you're solving.
Yeah, and then it goes into the system like, well, it's the best we've got. And I don't want to go too much into some of my past, but just like the reform system isn't too much different from prison back into society. And it was pretty bad, especially like I'm a trans woman. I'm post-op currently. But I was pre-op at a point in time when I had a fallout with, all that. And 12-step was no help. I mean, like the concept of a higher power and surrendering to something that is just like ridiculous, And so also there was a self-help book that I listened to. It was I listened to it on audiobook. It was called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And I mean, he sounded great through most of it, but at the very end, he got to that surrender point and talking about a white picket fence and, kids and dogs and blah, blah, blah. That's not the life that everybody wants. That's not what everybody's meant to surrender to. And
Sure.
It just seems like they're really just trying to point people in that direction. And so I kind of got out of the self-help genre.
It is, and you've just hit another little pet peeve of mine. The success rate of self-help books is almost zero. There's almost no self-help book that's going to help you because
even the ones with the Oprah seal of approval.
He's reading my mind already.
Yeah. Like, and even then, it's just like finding salvation. It's like a moment of like exhilaration or peace, or a moment of like a feeling of resolution, like you just suddenly had some realization, and then it's gone again. I mean, the brain's always preparing for I tell people the brain's always preparing for the next challenge, and that our morality and our consciousness comes second to that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. I was in the corporate world for many years as a psychologist, and I would get people call me up and say, we need a motivational speaker because the morale is low in our company and all that sort of stuff. And it's the same problem. Motivational speaking is just as bad as self-help books, just as bad as 12-step programs. There's all this shit that our culture has produced in the name of curing or recovering or motivating, and it all is based on really bad assumptions about how humans actually behave. So I would tell my corporate caller that, I'm not a motivational speaker because you can't motivate people more than about 10 minutes, and then back to work and their motivations.
Yeah, like it talks about that in TV shows, how like they captivate the audience, that they have it set up a certain way so that people catch like, the main parts or whatever. Like there's a psychology to that in our brain. And
the interesting thing, and I think this is an important lesson, we need to understand that religions and media, preachers, all of the influencers in our culture, they oftentimes know our psychology better than we do.
Sure.
And our job in the 21st century is to become educated about our own psychology so that we know we have some choices, and we're not just being led down the primrose path like sheep by.
It's like we may not have a free will, but we do have a will. And, there's a lot of mystery to that still. Even we know it's not a free will in a biblical sense, but, we do make our choices to some degree.
I like that. It's exactly my way of thinking too. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, Megan, I do have, what are some of the challenges? I'm curious. What are some of the challenges you faced in your own journey when you were looking at the underlying assumptions and beliefs that we were taught as a child, and as you journeyed where you're going now? What are some of the things you had to question and change and identify, and how did you identify? Man, I'm interested in that kind of a story a little bit. If you want to share. No, I don't want to hear your story. No, I don't want to hear a history. Okay. But I do. Just Can you give us a thumbnail of the important things that you.
Yeah, there are key things. There's a lot of things that I dealt with that a lot of trans women will not have to deal with these days, and they'll never understand what I went through as well. But like, okay, so I was born in 1980. I'm 38 currently. But I remember my earliest memories were playing like pretend makeup with the girls. I like playing with the girls more than the boys, and pretend makeup and stuff. And I loved it. I wanted to be pretty. I was like, I identified with that. And then, there was a lot of homophobia around me back then within my family. And it's kind of crazy. My mom's side comes from Missouri, and her dad, who I never met, was like in the KKK, which I think they're stupid, but I like Drunk History's story about them. But yeah, so there was a lot of bigotry. There was a lot of like hate for that. So, I kept it to myself. And like when I hit puberty, it's the typical story from there. I mean, as far as my female identity becoming more and more, secure. And I mean, it always felt right and like destiny. And I didn't even know about Deuteronomy until I was like 23. And so up until then, it felt innocent to me. And, but like I had like my mom saying, God doesn't make mistakes, and, stuff like that. And, and back then I would just start arguing back. Well, obviously in this case he did. And so the problem is like, at one point in time in my like mid-teens, they tried to like re-indoctrinate me. And I go to these counselors, but I would just get cocky with them because I would ask them questions like, well, if Lucifer is jealous of mankind for having free will, how did he choose to rebel against God? Like, how is that option even there unless it was created by God? Like, how, it never made sense. And it's one question to the next. And these counselors, it's always like, oh, there's always some, biblical gymnastics or apologetics. And
Right. You
Yeah.
are a real
But
troublemaker.
I
Well, I'm
yeah,
curious. Those weren't those kind of
well,
counselors are right out of the church. It sounds like.
well, it was bad. Yeah, it was bad actually because as a kid, being told, if I'm going to hell anyways, and like it was the 90s too on top of it. So, I got in with some bad crowds and I was partying, at a young age. And, I wound up in prison finally in my early 30s, but like it was an assault. And I mean, it wasn't anything too bad. It could have been a lot worse, but, yeah, like there's a lot of stuff incorporated there though with NA people trying to help somebody hit their rock bottom so they can get them to give up everything so they can reform them.
Right.
And for somebody who's like as deep seated transgender as me, it just did not fly. And like it led to more torture. And I don't know, I've been watching The Green Arrow lately, and I can kind of relate on many levels to different characters on that show. I really like the Arrowverse. There's a trans woman super heroine. Her name is Dreamer on Supergirl, and she's actually a trans woman in real life. She had to do with a bathroom issue at work or something, or people not wanting her to use the women's restroom. So yeah, it's very LGBT friendly, and I love it, and I find it inspiring. And obviously, I spend a lot of time on these. I'm on every Sunday, pretty much from morning till night, and So and it's great to make it over to this show too when I can.
Good.
So
I will say NA is just as bad as AA, and there's no more evidence for NA as there was for AA or any other 12-step stuff. And like Christy said, there's so much. They're integrated. They have injected themselves into the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they cause more problems by far than they ever solve, and they really create a whole ethos that undermines.
What happens is, sorry, I'm interrupting. Like, okay, well, I know exactly what happens here is that if somebody stumbles in the NA system, it's just so easy to justify falling completely to like doing your worst. And that was what I was going to get to earlier too, was with the Christian counselors and stuff, was like, it's like this all or none mentality. Even I think like liberal, like atheist Christians and liberal Christians or Unitarians, it all just leads, it's all pointed at fundamentalism, whether they want to admit it or not. And the further they are from that, the further they're going to feel shitty about themselves. And that's no way to live.
Right.
There
lies another issue that, Christy, we haven't really discussed, and that is there's an underlying assumption of 12 steps that you have to be abstinent.
Yeah. And this idea of sin. This idea that your addiction is the result of making repeated mistakes.
Yeah. But if you look at it from sex side,
they wanted me to surrender my female identity when I was pre-op transgender. They wanted me to give it all of identity and everything, and focus on like almost a humanistic approach, but without any respect for myself. It was just horrible. It was a nightmare. But I mean, I'm a strong person, and it didn't end well. I mean, like when I made it obvious I was not gonna give in. It was crazy. And I mean, like there's stuff I deal with even now because I don't follow that, but I do the best I can for myself, and I try to educate people about secular morality. And I'm in over in Walla Walla, Washington. There's like a church on like every other corner, and I walk around with a Baphomet necklace. I support the Church of Satan. There's a lot of PST people, and I don't hear any COS supporters, so I'm giving a shout out for the COS. I'm not an official member, but I am planning on going back to college, and once I get that money, I'm probably going to, send over for an official Baphomet.
Yeah, well, keep donating, keep tearing down monuments, keep, supporting the legal actions and the things that they've been a part of.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think it is crucial that we have like a kind of help program for secularists, you know, for like secular, but I don't like the word recovery because I view life as progressive. There's no,
Sure.
like, I don't want to worry about falling and having to pick myself up. I just want to progress and kind of, you know, be hyper aware to where I'm at and try to, you know, channel it from there and to make sure to get what I want or what I need, you know?
Right. Well, there's another point there I want to hit on. That is the notion of abstinence is the underpinnings for 12-step programs, and they've carted that over into sex addiction programs.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole notion of abstinence among sex addiction programs is ludicrous because
No, they connect anything passion with your addiction. They're like, if you engage in masturbation, you're going to end up doing meth. Oh, if you engage in being a woman, you're going to end up doing meth. That was what they pulled on me.
All roads lead to heroin, as they say.
They want to turn people stoic, and then you know, like, it's just sick to me. I mean, it's.
Well, thanks for calling, Megan. I appreciate your perspective on this and sharing your story a bit.
Yeah, it's been real. It's been awesome talking with you guys, and yeah, Dr. Ray, like, I love you. You're awesome, and I might get in touch with you more on the recovering from religion because I do deal with fear of hell PTSD. Not as bad now since I heard stuff about, you know, like that and how it is a form of PTSD. And yeah, so like I support your programs and like I want to become more and more active with the atheist community. So lots of love.
For volunteers at Recover from Religion. Thank you.
Yeah, great to hear. Thank you so much.
Good night.